Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wise Heart and Still Mind, How to Free Your Mind and Your Emotional Brilliance for Ultimate Happiness and Liberation. And I'm your host this evening. I'm Alan Davidson. I am the founder of the website throughyourbody.com. And here at Through Your Body, we're dedicated to our healthy, happy, and prosperous world through the full enlightenment of every human being. I'm also the author of Body Brilliance, Mastering Your 5 Vital Intelligences. It was the #1 health and wellness book, and it was in the Barnes & Noble. It was in their top, I think it reached #7 in their top 100 books. Body Brilliance also went on that year to win 2 National Book of the Year awards. And I am working on my new book, which is based on the things that we're going to cover this evening. What you're hearing tonight is really the latest research. Body Brilliance came out in 2007, and I've really been researching the relationship between an open heart and a still mind, or emotional intelligence and high-functioning, high-level mental intelligence, really for the last 4 years. And so you're getting the latest in that, so I'm pleased to share that with you. I have a degree in psychology with a real emphasis on sociology, philosophy, and religion. And I got my BS with the idea I would go into to get my master's of social work and become a psychotherapist. But before I graduated, I ended up going to massage school. I'll tell you that story shortly. And I realized that the power of the body and the intersection of the body and the mind and the spirit was a very powerful place. And that there were many, many, many psychotherapists, but there weren't really, in Houston at the time I was working, that many body workers who could really hold the space for an intersection of the body, the heart, the mind, and the spirit. I've been studying meditation since 1980, for sure. And for the last 16 years, I've led a weekly meditation group here in the Montrose area of Houston. And I've had the great privilege to study with some of the world-class meditation teachers of our time. So the reason that you're here and what I intend to do and share with you and inspire in you is how to free your mind and tap your emotional brilliance for your own ultimate happiness and liberation. And I'm going to really dive deep into just what that title means as we go through the program here. But the recipe that I really use is body, heart, mind, spirit, and shadow. When you're really working with those consciously, it will give you the joy and the freedom and self-realization that I believe that all of us as human beings long for and want. So today's program is for you if you genuinely want to be happy and joyful in your life. Now, you might think that's a stupid thing to say or that's a silly thing to say, but I want you to really take that on. Genuinely want to be happy and joyful. A lot of people are addicted to their pain or addicted to the trance that they're living in. And this program is for the people who genuinely want to break that trance. You want to be highly productive in your life and work. And you want to break the shackles of fear and ignorance in your life and be free, liberated, enlightened, self-realized. There are many, many terms for that. This program is not for you if you are a drama queen and you really love that aspect of yourself. You're an info junkie but not really ready for real change. You're unwilling to go deep into the shadow aspect of you. And if you're just a lightweight, if you're a sissy, this work does require courage, attention, and intention. And so I'm a firm believer in that being fun and light, and it can be very simple, but it does take courage. So if you're willing to do a deep dive with me this evening, we're going to introduce you into a few things and have some experiences together. There'll be some opportunities for some of you on the call who want to do some work one-on-one. I'm happy to do that with you. Okay, so what you will take away from tonight are the power of your 5 vital intelligences, the number one thing keeping you from living a healthy, prosperous, and enlightened life, the 5 keys to the good life, the 4 pillars of joy and a wise heart, the 5 toxic emotions trapped in your chakras, how to free your very own still mind, and what is the one simple shift that you can make to experience profound peace, love, joy, and enlightenment in your life. So as you can see, we have a lot to cover this evening, and I am so thrilled to be sharing this experience with you tonight. So we only have 90 minutes together for our program, and then I will take questions and answers. You'll notice that there is a little question box in your little viewing screen right there. So as we go through the program tonight, if you have questions, pop them into the box, and when we get to the Q&A, I'm happy to go over those. And for those of you that are genuinely interested in going a little deeper even than what we can cover in the 90 minutes, there'll be an opportunity for that too. So let me just tell you a little bit more about me. Before I was a successful massage therapist, before I led a meditation program for 16 years, before I was a best-selling author and an award-winning author, I was bartender to the fabulous. I moved to Houston in 1980 and, really rode the party life, had a fabulous time, lots of flashing highs, but also lots of crashing lows. And the behind the scenes of that, I was an IV drug user from 1979 to 1986. And in that period, I walked away from a full scholarship at SMU University. Shall we say, I was not in touch with my moral intelligence. I made some really poor choices and hung with some really poor people. And I was playing Russian roulette with my life. And so I'm telling you this because I want you to know that from the depths of my own addiction and pain, I was able to find a spiritual solution and a path out of that kind of intensity. But I also remember the day that I walked into the Montrose Clinic to get my first HIV test. When I first discovered that HIV was a virus, I just assumed that I would die a terrible, painful, lonely death like I had witnessed so many of my friends having, because I had shared needles with men who had already died from AIDS. So I just assumed that I was HIV positive. But I happened to live with a medical doctor who was an expert on HIV, and he kept saying, "Alan, I think you might be negative. You're just too healthy. You don't show any signs or symptoms." And he kept telling me that, "Alan, I think you might be negative. Alan, I think you might be negative." And after 6 months of hearing that, I decided to go get a test. Now, I had gotten sober in September of 1987, so I'd quit using IV drugs, but I was still snorting speed and other things like that. But I finally reached rock bottom and I got sober. And that's the point when Dr. Wayne was telling me that he thought I might be negative. So in 1988, I went and got my first test. And I remember going into that space, into that waiting room, the walls saturated with fear, and waiting for the confirmation that I would die. And they took me back to the room. The counselor very quickly told me that I was HIV negative. And it was one of those sort of Hollywood special effects moments, because a whooshing started to fill my ears, a tingling and an energy flooded my body, and it seemed like the counselor just sort of disappeared down a long, long tunnel, and I could barely hear what he was saying. I had been spared. The goddess, spirit, God, Allah, whatever you want to call it, divine essence, had placed her hand on my shoulder and spared me. I did not know why. So I was HIV negative then. I still am today. And I left the clinic vowing that I would no longer waste my talents and my strengths and my gifts, and that I would use them to make a better life for myself and hopefully for the community that I lived in that was suffering so much. 6 months later, I found myself in massage school. I wanted to go back and get my degree in psychology, but I was still bartending, and I wanted a healthy, viable way to make money, and so I ended up in massage school. And I really did it as a financial choice. It was one of those things that I was guided by sort of insight and inspiration. And I thought, oh, I can do that. But I had no idea that the healing door that I was walking through. And I just want to read you just a short paragraph from my book, Body Brilliance. Massage was not just a therapeutic touch. It was a spiritual practice. I explored the place where my body, long ignored, my mind, long indulged, my feelings, long buried, and my spirit, long denied, were interconnected. I experienced how touch called forth forgotten memories and soothed my mind so that my body could heal and my heart could open. As my mind relaxed, I began to unlock the shackles of fear that confined my life. Through massage therapy, I learned how to awaken my body and call forth all the dormant energies at the center of my life, how to discipline my mind, to express and acknowledge my emotions, in brief, how to caress my spirit and let it soar. So massage was not only an incredible healing opportunity for me, but it allowed me then to participate and facilitate the healing in other people. And it was an incredible gift to my life and a responsibility that I'm still considered one of the most precious gifts of my life. But I want to tell you, why is it that I do what I do in the world? And I want you, as I'm talking, to begin to question, why, what is your big why? What is the why that pulls you out of bed every morning? What is the why at the heart of your soul that calls you into your day and into your years and into the end of your life? What is the big why that if you allow it, will drive you to your own magnificence, your liberation, your consciousness, your compassionate, open heart? So what is my big why? I mean, you don't have to read the news or study the newspaper or watch television very much to realize that we live in a world that is fast becoming toxic, that we live in a world that still is filled with a lot of hatred and ignorance and confusion, where young women in Afghanistan who simply want the freedom to go to school are disfigured, or young women in Pakistan who want their own choices about relationships and life are disfigured with acid, or little young gay men like Matthew Shepard are beaten savagely and left like hanging on a cross on a fence in Wyoming, or where the Amazon is being deforested just massively, and that indigenous people are, their languages are being lost, their tribal ways are being lost, their lands are being lost. Or we live in a world where there are big, Wall Street fat cats who are making billions of dollars a year, when the average person in America is certainly not making that. But the average person in the world still might be living on less than $100 a month or $500 a year. And so there's this great imbalance in the world. And so my big why, I always come back to this great quote by Albert Einstein: no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created. To solve all the different problems that are facing us in the world today, in our individual lives, and certainly in our communities and in our world, we have to pull ourselves up by the bootstrap and grow up and evolve so that we can reach a higher level of consciousness and see clearly, strategically, what we need to do to shift. And so my firm belief for that to happen is that we need to reach a tipping point of people who are working consciously in their lives. They are working towards their own liberation, their self-realization, their own genuine happiness and joy. If you're vibrating with happiness and joy in your life, then you're uplifting everyone on the planet. And so that's when I say that we're dedicated to our healthy, happy, and prosperous world through the full enlightenment of every human being. And I firmly believe if we reach a tipping point of about 16% of the world's population, which is about the population of Europe right now, if we reach that number of people who are really vibrating at a place of enlightenment, self-realization, compassion, and joy, then we will manifest a change of a magnitude that we really can begin to solve some of these problems. So one of the bonuses for you tonight is I invite you, what is your big why? You know, mine is the full enlightenment of every human being. Now, it's a big task, but I happen to love what I do. So for you listening right now to our call, what is your big why? And, you know, I'd love it if you just, even in the questions box, just entered in, you know, what you think your big why is. Why is it that you do what you do? Why is it that you're on this call right now? So feel free to, you know, type that in for me. I'd love to hear that from you. Okay, so let's get on to the content for the evening. The number one takeaway, the power of your 5 vital intelligences. So this is the ideas, the philosophy, the theory that I introduced in Body Brilliance. In my many years of teaching, I taught massage for 10 years. I've been in practice for 24 years as a body worker, massage therapist. And in my own studies and my working with clients, I realized that we have these 5 levels of consciousness in our body. Physical intelligence, emotional intelligence, mental intelligence, moral intelligence, and then spiritual intelligence. And each of these IQs can be measured, they can be charted, they can be assessed and analyzed. And more importantly, each of these intelligences can be boosted and improved. And so, you know, I mentioned earlier body, heart, mind, spirit, and shadow. It's really these 5 intelligences working in harmony together and looking at those places where we're still stuck, where we are unconscious, and letting them go, you know, doing the work, going deep, and coming to that place of awareness. So when each of your 5 vital IQs is humming along, that you're getting the exercise and moving your body, you have a functional fitness, that when you really are doing your emotional work and living from a place of love and joy, when your mind is still and clear, when your moral intelligence, when you're living your passions, using your strengths, and connecting to that big why that drives your life, and your spiritual intelligence, that level of chi and prana and vital energy that flows through you, when that's maximized, and you really are in a permanent state of awareness. When you are working at that level, you are a supernova of energy and intention, and you really do affect the experience of the people around you and certainly in the whole world. Takeaway number 2, what's the number one thing keeping you from living a happy, healthy, and prosperous and enlightened life? And that thing is toxic emotions. Now, it's easy to talk about toxic emotions. You think about rageaholics, or people who act really cruelly, or who are very explosive in their anger, or people who live in a chronic state of fear. And those are extremes. And we're going to be talking about the spectrum of our emotional experience, from absolute joy and ecstasy and bliss and delight to just, you know, the average day anxiety that many of us feel, or the level of irritation that we might feel waiting in line at Starbucks or caught in traffic. Or, you know, some of us get really stuck in shame and feeling embarrassed about some aspect of ourselves. Or perhaps there's a low level of grief that's unprocessed in our bodies. As I said, I survived the AIDS epidemic, and there are hundreds of people that it took me a very long time to grieve. I'm still grieving some of those friendships that were lost. But we all have things that we're grieving. And so we have to learn to not only come to terms with those emotions that keep us in a state of unrest and imbalance and agitation, instead of a beautiful sense of deep, connected open-heartedness and a real, peaceful, blissful state of an open mind. So I want to talk to you for a moment about, I could do a whole program on neuroscience and the brain and how it relates to emotions and enlightenment, but I'm just going to do this little touch right here. We, as human beings, run on habit. I saw a study from Duke University that said that as many as 60% of the choices that we make in every single day are completely unconscious and they're habitual. We don't even have to think about them. And the same is true for the way that we respond to the stimulus in our lives. And this graphic, this yellow graphic here on the left, is from a book called The Power of Habit, which is one of the best books that I've read this year. It's really excellent. And they look at how we can begin to create new habits in our lives and some of the latest research on habits. And the basic is that there's a cue, there's a stimulus of some kind, and then we automatically go into a specific routine and respond to that particular stimulation. And then there's some sort of emotional or sensational or sensory reward to that. And when that happens over and over and over, it becomes a habit. So whether that's tying your shoes or, say, the example of you have a boss that frustrates you in some way, and you see that boss coming towards you, that him walking towards your desk, that's the cue. And what's the routine that you go through? That's part of it's your thoughts. Oh, here he comes again. Here is this frustrating situation. He never seems to hear me or think of me and see me in the way that I deserve to be thought of. He's so mean. He's such a bully. Whatever that thinking process is. And then there is the emotion, which for you could be anger, could be irritation, it could be fear, anxiety. But we get hooked in those cycles of emotion. So whether it's a cycle of grief, a cycle of shame, one of anger, one of cravings or desire, one of fear, we get that emotional reward, and we get addicted and hooked to the reward. So what's that got to do with the brain? Well, our brains evolved over many, many billions of years. And, first we talk about our lizard brain, which is just the 3 levels of sex and safety and sustenance. It's that aspect of our brain that is the most primitive, and it's what keeps us absolutely safe and secure and nourished in our lives and procreating. And then from the lizards, then grew the small furry animals, and that's the limbic system. That's where we began to care for our young and relate to each other and develop the spectrum of emotions. And then over millions and millions of more years, then the primates, the monkeys, developed with the capacity to really think and assess and understand multiple ideas. And then from that, human beings with, notice the porpoise, that's that higher purpose in life, and that's the upper frontal cortex, our ability, they call that our executive mind, our executive function, our executive brain. But it's that furry little animal, the little possum there, that's where most of our emotions are triggered, stimulated, managed, controlled. And it's a part of the brain that's very challenging to change. So it takes specific practice and awareness. So absolutely they can be changed. I'm going to give you a little tip right here. One of the simplest ways to begin to change your emotional response is aerobic exercise. Go get your heart rate up. And they found that not only the aspects of the amygdala and the lower parts of the limbic system, they generate new neurons. Aerobic exercise generates new neurons in your brain, which then allows you to choose consciously what you want those new neurons to be assigned to. Do you want it to be that old habitual pattern of anger or fear? Or do you choose to channel those neurons in your brain to a place of love and consciousness and awareness? So oftentimes, unless we're very, very conscious of our emotional state, we can have a thought and emotional reaction that can really spiral out of awareness. And I call that hijacking my mind, because the emotions get more and more agitated. They become more and more intense. And so I want to give you a very, very simple exercise tonight, the single most powerful way that I know to stop a hijacking emotion in its track and come back to a sense of calmness and centeredness is a very, very simple little breath, which I call the Valium breath. It's so powerful, it's like taking a Valium. So I'd like to share that with you and teach it to you right now. It's if you can, if you're driving, you may not want to practice the breath for too long a period of time, but it will certainly help relax you in your driving. For those of you that are just sitting and listening, then please just close your eyes for a moment. And the breath is very, very simple. It's an in breath for a count of 3, in, 2, 3, and then a pause. And then an out breath for a count of 6. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then another pause. The emphasis on the out breath absolutely relaxes your body, your nervous system, and eventually your mind. Even if you just do this simple breath for a minute or two, you will notice a difference. If you do it for 4 minutes or 5 minutes, you will absolutely know. It affects the autonomic nervous system in the spinal cord and the brain, which affects all the major organ systems in your body. It tells them to relax, to soothe, to slow down. And as all your organs are slowing down and coming back to a place of calmness, then your mind will also begin to relax. So let's just do that for a minute here together, and I will start counting it out. And, you know, I'm a big guy. I've got big bellows lungs. So I will leave you just for the rest of the minute then to find your own rhythm. So here we go. In, 2, 3, pause. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, pause. In, 2, 3, pause. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, pause. At your own pace. In for 3, pause. Out for 6, pause. We'll just do that for about 15 more seconds. Okay, that's just about a minute right there. So what did you notice? Just doing that breath for a short amount of time like that. You can pop something into the question box there if you want to, or if you want to just speak to me directly, you can raise your hand. And if you've got you happen to dial in, you're using your telephone, or if you've got a microphone on your computer, I'm happy just to say hi to you. Just raise your hand. Okay, so takeaway number 4, what are the 5 keys to the good life? Well, as we begin to look at a wise heart and a still mind in the bigger picture, we really are starting to look at where East meets West. And Aristotle, who lived about 2,400 years ago, is still considered one of the most important figures in Western philosophy and psychology and understanding the life of the emotions. So what are the 5 keys to the good life? The Greeks talked about Eu-die-mo-nia. Eudaimonia, which translated roughly to flourishing, or is often called the good life. And here are the 5 elements: positive emotions, engagement, healthy, loving relationships, having meaning and purpose, and then some level of achievement or mastery in your lives. So from a Western psychological, philosophical perspective, just to be happy in your life, you need to be working with these 5 elements. And notice that positive emotions is first and foremost. Cultivating our emotions and positive emotions is essential. And so just the little short meditation I just gave you is one way to begin to break yourself from those low levels of anxiety or irritation that can be hijacked and go into full-blown fear or anger or the other emotional states. Engagement is very important. It's those flow states. You heard athletes who say, oh, the run ran itself. Or you'll hear dancers say, oh, the dance danced itself. They so practiced, so rehearsed, so embodied that as the music starts, the movement starts, the sort of the ego and the self disappears and the dance happens. Or if you've got a particular hobby of some kind, when you really, really get engrossed in it, it's that level of engagement. You go into a flow state, and that's when time sort of disappears, and you go, wow, how did I just spend 2 hours doing this thing we love so much? Loving, healthy relationships are so essential to our well-being, our flourishing, our happiness. And I know a lot of you guys came through Rich Gurman, who talks about passion. And this 4th element here, meaning and purpose, is really finding what is your core passion in life and living it fully and wholly. It's so important. And, so the big why, the question that I asked you at the beginning of this conversation, whatever that is for you. And when you are living towards something that is larger than yourself, it gives you a level of satisfaction, a purpose in your life that you simply cannot get anywhere else. And then the final element is that of achievement, of mastery. We as human beings love to grow, to challenge ourselves, and to master the difficulties that face us. So you've got to have something in your life that challenges you. And if you don't have all 5 of these, then you definitely are not living into, the happiest that you can be as a human being. Now, a lot of these ideas are talked about in Martin Seligman's latest book, Flourish. And he is the founder of positive psychology. And so I highly recommend his book if you want to go more deeply into the latest research on human flourishing. And it was very foundational in my own thinking, so I highly recommend it. But then we shift from a Western philosophical perspective, and we come now to your thoughts are the foot soldiers of your ego. Your emotions are the generals. That's a quote by Trungpa, who was one of a great Tibetan Buddhist teacher from the last century. He actually started Naropa Institute, which is a 4-year accredited college in Boulder that's based on Buddhist principles. So from the Western perspective, it's talking about just working consciously with our emotions. From the Eastern perspective, whether it's Hinduism, Taoism, or Buddhism, there's talking about liberating ourselves from these negative emotions and these toxic emotions. And certainly the Buddha laid out 2,400 years ago a map for how to liberate ourselves from these emotions. So I think that this quote from Trungpa is very, very revealing in that it shows that your thoughts are the foot soldiers of your ego, but your emotions are the generals. This addiction to these low levels of toxic emotions is what keeps the ego ensconced in place and keeps us from really finding that ultimate happiness that we all seek, and certainly that liberation or that enlightenment, self-realization that many of the souls on earth today are seeking. So takeaway number 5, the 4 pillars of joy and a wise heart. Now, these also happen to be the 4 components of a very high level of emotional intelligence, or EQ. I call them I-wise, I am self-aware, I-mastery, I've mastered myself, I've mastered my own emotions, and I'm not a hostage to them anymore. And then also equally important in a wise heart is we-wise, a social awareness, what's going on with you, what's the emotional state that you're in, and then we-mastery, which is, it's a social mastery. And I want to tell you a story. It's one of my favorite stories. There was an American who in the early 70s had gone to Japan to study Aikido. He was really one of the first Americans that was allowed to go and study with an Aikido master. And as he arrived, the master said, I'm willing to teach you these principles, but you cannot use them outside of the dojo. You can't use them outside of the studio where we are exercising and learning. They're very powerful techniques, and I don't trust you in the world right now to use them consciously. You might abuse them. And so Terry said, okay, I accept. Flash forward later in his training, and he's on the subway in Tokyo, and a big Japanese man, very heavy set, very drunk, gets on the subway cart. And he's very belligerent, and he's obnoxious, and he's bumping into people, and he actually knocks a woman down, and her groceries go everywhere. And Terry is just about to got this conversation in his mind saying, oh, here's a chance for me to use my Aikido skills. And I know that in a moment like this, my sensei, my teacher, would approve. But just before Terry springs into action, from the back of the subway, there goes, hey, what you doing? And this tiny little Japanese man walks up to the drunk. What do you mean, what am I doing? Yeah, how are you doing? Have you been drinking? What have you been drinking? I've been drinking sake. Oh, I love sake. Me and my wife love sake. We sit in the garden every evening and have a little sip of warm sake. Does your wife like sake too? My wife died. And he engaged the drunk in conversation. And as the story came out, the drunk's wife had died. He had lost his job. He had lost their home together. And he was just drowning his sorrows in drink. And Terry, when he finally got off the subway, looked back, and the drunk was laying on the subway with his head in the little man's lap, crying. That little Japanese man had diffused the entire situation, and without lifting a hand, without resorting to any confrontation, he simply engaged him at the level he was at and gave him a space to tell his story. And that's an example of social mastery, of we mastery. And that takes a certain level of consciousness to develop that and to be able to use it in the moments when we really need it. Okay, so I've talked a lot about the emotions here, the 5 toxic emotions stored in your chakras. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands what I mean by chakras. It is a concept from the tantric philosophy or the yogic tradition in India. It's the idea that we have 7 wheels of light along our spinal column, and that each of those 7 vibrates at a level of color in the rainbow. They deal with a level of consciousness in our bodies. They regulate different hormonal glands. They help to work with different aspects of the body, physical body themselves. And it is the aspect of our spiritual intelligence that connects us to the divine. And so the lower 5 chakras also are a hub for each of these different toxic emotions. And so the root chakra, which is related also to the adrenal glands in the body, which is our fight, flight, or freeze, it deals with the emotion of fear. The second chakra, which relates to our reproductive organs in the body, also relates to cravings and lust. Our solar plexus, which is right just below the lungs and the rib cage, right there where the rib cage comes together, is anger. It's the issues of self-empowerment. It is where we feel that anyone's invaded our space, that has crossed a line, a boundary of some kind, and we have to respond in anger to protect ourselves, to clear our space. Now, we in the West get really confused about anger. The heart chakra is about shame, and it really is, at its purest, the heart chakra is really about open vulnerability. An open heart is being undefended and completely vulnerable and available to the moment. And what shame is it's an excruciating, a painful level of vulnerability. We get embarrassed. We become ashamed that we're going to be judged or criticized or excommunicated in some way. And so that's held in the heart center. And then the throat is grief. And there's two levels to that grief. The first level is, the grievings that we have for the life that we're in. If we've achieved goals, we've lost, one of our purposes for living. If we've lost our pets, if we've lost homes or jobs, and then also when people die, whether it's our grandparents, our parents, our friends, our spouses, it's a life of grief. And we're afraid that we've lost something that we cannot ever replace or reproduce or recreate. The other level of grief is from a chakra perspective and a spiritual perspective. The soul, in its purity, doesn't exist in three-dimensional time and space. And then when the soul agrees to be born, it then has to choose to come into a physical body and be harnessed into, shoehorned into the laws of time and space. And so I think there's a level of grief where the soul is still longing for that purity and that ease of movement and consciousness that is the love at the heart of the universe. But part of that gets cut off as we move into three-dimensional time and space. So there's also a grieving that the soul is experiencing as it lived in consciousness. Okay, so what is the prescription for these toxic emotions that are held in the chakras? And again, as I've said, body, heart, mind, spirit, and shadow. Well, what do I mean by that? So emotional brilliance is a way to heal the corrosive emotions and toxic memories with sensory regression and EFT-Tapping, which is emotional freedom technique. Tapping is very well known at this point. And I'm wondering if anyone is feeling like they would like to do a little demonstration and work with me on maybe some emotion that you're feeling in your life right now that you feel like you're kind of stuck with. It's an habitual pattern for you, and that you might like to just resolve an emotional experience in your life. If that's the case, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll unmute you and we can do some work. And as we begin to do that, I just want to point out, so this is a beautiful graphic that I had created of a Buddha, but the tapping points are here on the eye, the inner eye, the outer eye, and there's a little bony profusion right there under the eye. There's above the upper lip and between the nose and the lip. And then here's the crest point of the chin. And then the other point that I use is right here where your clavicle bone meets your rib cage. And if you'll just press that right now, you'll see that that's a tender point. And then just about 2 inches underneath your underarm, it's one of the lymphatic points. These are all acupuncture meridian points in the body. They're very, very sensitive, can be sensitive, and they connect us to the bones and the connective tissues of our body, but also the acupuncture meridian system, which is another way of looking at the energy. The chakras is more of an Indian, Hindu perspective, and then the acupuncture meridians are the Chinese and the Korean and the Japanese perspective on that. And then the final point here is at the top of the head. There's where most of the meridians in the body come together is at the top of the head. So when you tap there, you're actually tapping the whole spectrum. Well, I see there's no brave souls on the call that are interested in doing a little bit of work, but I can tell you that the way that I work with clients and in groups is that we actually tap into an emotional experience. Say we're working with the emotion of anger, and we'll touch base with the superconscious mind so that we're ensured that everything happens for the highest good of everyone involved. And then I'll just say, go back to a point when the self was really, really angry. And then what are the sensations of that memory? What's the story? What's going on? Who's there? Who's involved? What are the colors? What are the smells? What are the sensations in your body? And then we will, okay, let's see. I believe Nikki has raised her hand, so let's see. Nikki, are you there? Oh, I see. Nikki's here, but no mic. Okay, I gotcha. Well, it's for this particular experience. I appreciate that you volunteered, but we really need an audio so that I could do some work with you. Let me think about if there's a way that we can we could do this without having. Well, let's just try it. Let's just try it. I'm willing to try it if you are. But you'd be communicating with me, okay? Okay, great. Okay, for an anger issue, perfect. Okay. So everybody, what I invite you to do, we're going to do a process with Nikki here, but I invite you to go through the process yourself. And even though I'm working directly with Nikki, I invite you to tap along with us on this process. So, Nikki, I want you just to close your eyes and think about this memory that is closely associated with the anger that you want to work with. And when you have that, you can just type a little X in the question box for me so I know you have the memory. Okay, great. And so, Nikki, I want you just to focus in on the story of what's happening here. All the people that are involved in the memory, the colors, the sounds, the smells, the intensity, the emotion, where you feel the emotion in your body. Just allow it to be as vivid as you possibly can. And for everybody listening, go to some place, some memory that you have of being really angry. When you have that, Nick, you just type a little X in the box. Okay, great. And now, if you don't mind, just tell me the story of what's going on. Just type that in the question box for me. And for those of you working with your own memory, I see. So one, there's two levels of anger going on. So there's actually 3 different things happening simultaneously. One is that your father never participated in your own life. You were molested by your uncle, and that a lot of the women in your own family suffered similar experiences, and that these issues have carried forth into adulthood and to low self-esteem. Okay, so Nikki, what I want you to do, and I want you to focus on, and it's still, you want it to be better, but also this is a constant issue. Okay, great. So I want you to focus on one memory, one experience, and we're just going to work on that this evening, okay? So I want you to feel one memory where you were really angry around this issue, and laser focus on it. Okay. So tell me what's going on in that moment, in the picture in your mind. Okay, so you're visualizing your father was never there, but tell me a moment in your life where you are experiencing this and feeling rejected, feeling lost, feeling empty. So, I'm wanting to be as specific as we can here because, this is a very, very, this is a lifetime pattern here, so there's a lot of emotion. So as we get specific, it will allow us to begin to unravel this emotion. Okay, so every time you encounter a relationship with a man, so can you give me a specific memory of meeting somebody new and being attracted and wanting to be with this man, but you hit that barrier of being emotionally and physically unavailable? Okay, so give me a moment of being attracted to this person, and yet you can feel your own limitations and barriers. Tell me exactly where you are. Okay, so over the last year you met someone named David. So I want you to give me a pinpoint, a day, an hour where you were attracted to David and you were unable to move forward in the relationship the way you wanted to because you were feeling this emotional barrier and this physical unavailability to him. Okay, I don't understand what that exactly means. Nikki, can you clarify that for me? He only participated when he wanted to. And for those of you listening and working with us, I invite you to go as deep into this memory of your own anger as you can. Okay, all right, so you reached out by calling to express wanting to spend time with him, and he ignores it. Okay, and yet you knew he was available. Okay, so I want you to pinpoint a day in your life where you had called him and he didn't respond to your request, and you felt that it was very one-sided. I want you to pick a day where you made the call, but he didn't respond. Okay. And when you have that day, let me know. Okay. So, I want you to focus on what are you wearing that day? What are the smells around you as you're feeling so rejected and so frustrated and so angry that he won't call you back, that you reached out to him and he's not responding? What are the smells? What are the colors that you see? Okay. All right. So so Nikki, I appreciate that you have this image in your head and in your imagination, but I want you to tune into the real world, the sensations of the real world and what you were really feeling. So you had this beautiful image. Okay, you felt dark. Where in your body did you feel it? Where do you feel this darkness? In your throat area, in your heart. Beautiful. Okay. Does it have a temperature? Is it hot? Is it cold? Hot and feel like it's swelling. Great. In your throat. Okay. Now, is it making a sound? This dark feeling that's in your throat and in your chest and your heart. You feel it really hot. So making a sound, like a white noise. Okay, great. Does it have a color? Black. Okay, great. All right, what about a texture? Bumpy. Okay, great. So, Nikki, as you're really tuning into these sensations in your body, I want you to rate it for me on a scale of 0 being totally at ease and at peace with this experience, and 10 being just so dark, so painful, so excruciating. Where would you rate your scale in this memory right now? A 7. Okay, thank you. And for all of you listening at home, tuning into your own memory of being angry, what would you rate it? What's the intensity level of your anger or the emotion that you're feeling in this memory? And just write it down for yourself so that you have a little record here. Okay, so Nikki, are you willing to do some tapping? Okay. Great. And so one of the things we do, and I just realized that if you notice the way the man's palms are together, the karate chop point is that point of the heel of your hand, where if you were using a karate chop on a piece of wood, it's the point that you'd hit. So I want you to tap on that, and that's called the setup phrase. And even though that you may not have any memories or experiences like Nikki at all, I invite you to say them out loud and tap with us, and then just see if it has any effect at all on your memory and the intensity level that you wrote down. Okay, so Nikki, are you ready? Tapping on the karate chop point, and I want you to say out loud with me, here I am. I've called David, and he's not calling me back. I'm so angry. I feel so hurt. Why won't he call me back? In my mind, I know everything would be so beautiful between us. It's this hateful pattern that's plagued me all of my life. Ever since my dad abandoned me, ever since my uncle molested me, it's a curse that all the women in my family have had. This emotional barrier, this physical unavailability. And in spite of all this pain, all this intensity, I choose to deeply and profoundly love myself. I choose to deeply love and accept myself. And now we're going to shift and we're going to tap through the points. So I'm not going to call out the points, but I'll remind you the upper eyebrow, side of the eye, under the eye, just under the nose, the chin, that clavicle point where the bone meets the ribs, under the arm, and top of the head. So just repeat and tapping just on the different points that feel good to you as we go through. Nikki, repeat after me, and everybody repeat after me as we work. Here I am. I have these beautiful images in my mind. Lavenders, rainbows. My life with David could be so beautiful. And then I call him and invite him to spend time with me. And he's not calling me back. And I know he's available. Why is he ignoring me? I feel so hurt. I feel so rejected. Oh, this hurts my heart so much. I have this blackness in my throat. It's hot and swelling. Just so black. I feel so rejected. It's so painful. Why does this happen to me? All this emotional unavailability. All this physical unavailability. Oh my God. It's a curse I've lived with all of my life. My father didn't want me. My father was never around my entire life. And all my uncle ever wanted was to molest me. All the women in my life had this very same experience. No one to love, no real intimacy, no high self-esteem, no confidence, no courage. But in spite of all of these feelings and all of these sensations, I choose to deeply and completely love and accept myself. I choose to profoundly love and accept myself. Because I realize now that I'm in control of my life. I realize now that I can redirect my emotions, that I can master my own emotions. I can master my own mind and can redirect my feelings. I can slowly and strategically develop positive, loving emotions for myself and the people in my life. And as I begin to grow and evolve my emotions, then I begin to attract genuine people who can love me and share a life with me. Because I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And take a deep breath, Nikki, and everybody listening. And so, Nikki, can you tell me I'm full of tears? Okay. Good tears. Beautiful, beautiful. It hurt at first. So but then it eased as we continued, yes. So on a scale of 0 being totally at ease and at peace with this memory of this day that you felt David rejected you, and 10 being excruciating, what's the intensity level now? 4. So it's gone from a 7 to a 4. So I want you just to tune into your own body right now and just tell me what are the sensations that are there. You feel relaxed, okay, less tense. So tell me about the tension you still do feel. Where is there still some tightness or tension in your body? shoulders, okay. Any place else that you feel tense or blocked or feeling that emotional or physical unavailability at the back of the neck. Okay, great, great. Okay. And for those of you, okay, thank you, Nikki. For those of you that are still listening at home, if you're able to take your memory down to a 0 or a 1, where you really are just at ease and relaxed about it, that's beautiful. If there's a 2 or higher in any way, then notice in your own body, what are you sensing? Where are you still tight? Where are you still resisting, and what's going on? Okay. So, Nikki, you ready to do some more tapping? Okay. So starting with a karate chop point on the hand, doesn't matter which one. I like to go back and forth in different rounds of tapping. So Nikki, repeat after me. And everybody listening, repeat after me. Here I am. I can feel these tears. It hurt at first. It was so painful at first. But now they're good tears. I can still feel the sting of David's rejection. I reach out to him. I make myself vulnerable. I want to spend time with him. And he just doesn't call me back. And damn it, I know he's available. Just hurts so much. This curse I've carried so many years. I so much just want to share myself with my true beloved. But there's this huge emotional unavailability. This physical unavailability. It's a curse I've carried since my father abandoned me, since my uncle molested me. And all the women have carried the same burden that I do. A darkness inside my chest, inside my throat. I can feel the tension in my shoulders right now. The tension and tightness in the back of my neck. But I'm taking a deep breath. And let's tap through the points, Nikki, and everybody listening at home. Here I am. I can feel these tears hot on my cheeks. The sting of David's rejection. The pain being rejected again. I make myself vulnerable and ask for closeness and time together. And all I get is silence, radio silence, nothing, no call, no respect, no kindness. And I know he's available. I have this blackness in my heart. Feels hot and swelling in my throat. This pain. But I'm willing to let it go now. This tension in my shoulders. This tension in my neck. I'm willing to let it go now. Just as I'm willing to let this curse, all this anger stored in my third chakra, I'm willing to let it go now. I'm willing to be free of this curse and this burden and all this anger. Anger at my father, fury at my uncle, anger that all the women in my family have carried the same curse. I'm willing to neutralize it in my third chakra now. I'm willing to let it go from my body, from my bones, from my connective tissues. I'm willing to let go of all the anger right now and just be me. And in the midst of all this, I choose to deeply love and accept myself. I choose to be free. I choose to profoundly love and accept myself. In spite of everything I've been through. In spite of this tension in my shoulders. In spite of this tension in my neck. I choose to take a deep breath. I choose to shake it all out. I choose to deeply love and accept myself. And take a deep breath, Nikki. And tell me, what are you sensing right now? Relief. What else are you sensing? Yeah, ease. Beautiful. More at ease. So how would you rate the intensity level now, Nikki? Still at a 4. Okay. Okay. Well, let's do one more round of tapping. And so everybody that's listening at home, notice what's your intensity level around the anger issue that you wrote down or the emotional issue that you wrote down. And just make a note of it. Write it down for me. We'll do one more round. Okay. Okay. All right, so let's tap. Nikki, let's just go through the points here. I remember the day so vividly. I just wanted to be with David. I wanted to share some time with him, to feel that intimacy, to feel that physical connection, to enjoy my desire, our desire. And I make the call. And I'm so eager to have him call me back, to hear his response, to hear him say yes. In my mind, there were rainbows. It's all so beautiful. We could have a good time together. I can see the lavenders, the beautiful, beautiful colors. And he doesn't call, and the anger's coming, and the rejection, and the fear, the self-loathing, the blackness in my throat, hot and swelling, the tension in my chest and heart. I felt it all my life. And in this moment, I choose to let it go. Because I now know that I can choose my thoughts and I can choose my emotions. I don't have to be hijacked by this horrible feeling ever again. I have new tools. I have new insights. I have new awareness. I am choosing to love myself. I am no longer a hostage to my past. I am no longer a hostage to David, or my dad, or my uncle, or to the other women in my family. I choose to be free. I choose consciously to open my heart to me, to love me, to be me and free. I choose to love myself. I choose to love me, to open my heart to my needs and my desires and my joy, and to open my heart to the people who most want that for me and with me. I don't have time for the haters anymore. I don't have time for the abusers. I have the courage and the strength to open my heart, to release the anger knotted up in my third chakra, letting it completely dissolve, letting it go. I choose to be free. It's only this one memory, and I'm willing to let it go because I am willing to love and accept myself just the way I am. And everybody take a breath and shake that out. So, Nikki, on a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate the intensity of this memory now? A 1. Beautiful. So, feeling very calm now. Lovely. So Nikki started at a 7, and she's now down at a 1, which is a good place. We can always pause here. Repetition seems to be the key. That you don't know, Nikki, but that is one of my main mantras in my life. Repetition is the key. We're cultivating positive emotions. We want to do the things that inspire and instill positive emotions over and over and over and over. So for those of you that were listening at home, what's your intensity level for the issue and the memory that you had? Even though we're clearly focused on Nikki, just notice if perhaps your intensity level went down some, or maybe even all the way to a 1 or 0 yourself. So Nikki, thank you very much for doing this and taking the time. And she says that my guidance and the verbiage was perfect and is much appreciated. And you'll also have the recording of this. I'll be posting it at some point tomorrow, so you can always go back and listen. So great. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section. So how to free your very own still mind is one of the promises of our time this evening. And, basically I'm talking about moments of enlightenment where the ego and the self just dissolve and slip away. Time dissolves. Space might even seem to dissolve. And runners talk about that, with the runner's high. Or anything that's trance-inducing, whether it's dancing or prayer or ritual. There are certain points, and there are no known rules about this, but, we can do things, and all of a sudden, our sense of self is just dissolved, and we are connected to the universe in a greater sense of self. Meditation, I put Zazen here. This is a picture of a Zen retreat, people sitting in Zazen, where you will often sit 8 to 10 hours in meditation through a day, usually in silence. So there are certain points in meditation when the mind will finally let go, and there's this incredible sense of spaciousness. Now, the first 3 examples here, runner's high, trance dance, Zazen, meditation, retreats, they all take incredible discipline and training and work and investment, and you still never know when you're going to have that transcendent experience. But we now have some techniques that allow us to experience that much more simply and quickly. You don't have to sit on a meditation bench for 3 years or 5 years or 8 years or 10 years to have a satori moment, an enlightening moment of awareness. Thanks to the big mind process and the tapping liberation process, you can have that on your own. And so what is tapping liberation? It is the pinnacle of my own work, my own years of studying psychology and spiritual disciplines and mystical traditions from all over the world. I've studied Hinduism, Tantra, yoga, Taoism, Buddhism, Sufism, the kahunas in the Hawaiian tradition, the shamans in South America. So it's really the ultimate result of my work, and now combining it with the EFT and the tapping. So you saw how effective the EFT was for Nikki with a very, very painful memory and experience. And how just in a matter of maybe 20 minutes of tapping, she was able to release the intensity and pain of that moment. Well, what the tapping liberation does, it combines the insights of Carl Jung, who was one of the founding fathers of psychoanalysis. He and Jung were friends and colleagues for a number of years, and then had a falling out. And Carl Jung is really the father of archetypal therapy, and as so many things we think of about modern psychology really were introduced to us by Freud and by Jung. Fritz Perls was the founder of Gestalt psychotherapy, which was very popular in the late 50s and the 60s. Hal and Sidra Stone brought to us voice dialogue. Hal is a Jungian analyst, and the voice dialogue is the idea that we have multiple subpersonalities or aspects of ourselves. And you might think in terms of, oh, I've got a committee that's inside of my head, and there are different voices or perspectives or points of view that have an idea of what I should do in the moment for safety or security or happiness or well-being or satisfaction or whatever it is. And each of those little voices has a very different point of view. Well, Hal and Sidra Stone with Voice Dialogue said, let's talk to each of those subpersonalities. Let's hear what its fear is and its concern and its issue is and what its gift is to the self. And it's a very, very powerful practice. I've studied it off and on since 1994, I think, so almost 18 years now. And then Dennis Genpo Merzel, Roshi, is a Zen master, an American Zen master, a nice Jewish boy from New York, who's now a Zen master. And Genpo had studied with Hal and Sidra Stone in Los Angeles. And they were focusing mostly on sort of the shadow aspects of the self, the dysfunctional aspects of the self. And what Genpo realized is that not only do you have all these voices of the self, but in Zen they talk about the 10,000 enlightened aspects of consciousness. And what Genpo realized is that just by facilitating this simple process, that the 10,000 voices, each of us can tap into and experience in a matter of moments. And instead of sitting on a bench for 15 years, then, within 90 minutes, an ordinary person who's never meditated in their lives could have an enlightening experience. So it's really, really very impressive and amazing. And the first time I did it, it was just like, oh, I've finally come home. And then obviously the Buddha and the insights of Buddha Dharma and enlightenment from the Buddhist perspective, combined with some insights from my friend Leigh Titus and EFT-Tapping. That's what tapping liberation is. So the tapping liberation combines two things. One is the emotional brilliance, which is the work that we just did with Nikki. And, we use a regression meditation to take us back to the earliest memory of the anger and the sensation, or the emotion and the sensations in our bodies. And oftentimes that's very young, 4 years, 2 years, toddlers. I've even had some people who've experienced things inside their mother's wombs. And we use the tapping then to completely neutralize the emotions and sensations and the experience. And then often what happens is then that emotion just sort of collapses along the memories that we have regressed through. And so it's like we've healed one whole aspect of the self. Now, you can't imagine that doing this one time is going to heal all the anger issues in your life, but it's helpful. And I find it's my personal practice. But then once I'm in a really beautiful and calm state, it's very easy then to talk to some of the voices of the ego and the self, and speak to the enlightened voices. So I'm going to do a little practice with you, and I want you all just to follow along with me. And it's very, very simple process. If anybody would like to work with me in this voice dialogue process and experience this enlightenment in just a matter of minutes, just raise your hand. If you've got a microphone, I really do need a microphone to work with you. So if you're feeling like you want to experience what I'm describing, I'd love to share it with you. So raise your hand or raise a question, and we'll come to that. Okay, well, no one's raising their hand, but I'm going to ask you to do something, to do an experience with me. And I'm going to ask to speak to a voice. If you've done the tapping, you're already relaxed. You're already in a sense of place. So I'm just going to ask to speak to a voice. And I'm going to ask you to kind of move in your chair, like you're squirming in your chair, and just trust that when you come back to a place of stillness, I'm going to ask you to sit up straight, and I'm just going to ask to speak to the voice of the stillness of pure being. So everybody shift in your chair, and please allow me to speak to the stillness of pure being. And I want you to say out loud, I am the stillness of pure being. And now I want you just to look deeply into yourself. And just how deep are you? As the stillness of pure being, can you sense in your own awareness how vast and spacious you are? As you look deeply into yourself, do you have a sense of any boundary at all? Can you sense how boundless you really are? Can you sense that you are the great paradox of life? All creation arises within you, and all things collapse within you. Time, space, worlds, stars, mountains, empires, all arise within you, all fall away. You are the stillness at the heart of the universe. No limitations, no boundaries. You are stillness, inexhaustible stillness. You are pure being. Let's just sit for a moment in this beautiful place of stillness. Beautiful. So now I'm going to ask to speak to a voice that integrates all the aspects of you and yourself and your ego and all the aspects of the enlightened, the 10,000 enlightened voices that are just ready and waiting for you to shift and to be. So when I ask, please shift in your chair again and say, I am the fully integrated, fully functioning human being. And that's just a little taste of this tapping liberation. If we had more time, I would actually tap in those aspects of the stillness of pure being, all those beautiful poetic words that I use to describe that. We would tap that into your body your connective tissues, your bones, and the energy grid of your body, which really makes the state very, very beautiful. But we've been going for 90 minutes here. I did promise to tell you an opportunity to go deeper with this work if you wanted to, and certainly open it up for any questions that you might have about anything that we've talked about this evening. So I just want to say that it has been a privilege to have you and share with you on the line what I love doing. If you are interested at all in Houston, Texas, in November, I'm having a Friday evening weekend experience that would really go into each of the 5 toxic emotions and neutralizing and clearing them, and then using this beautiful stillness of pure being, the tapping liberation, to give you an experience of how to really transcend and come from our old habitual ways and emotional ways of being in the world, and to come to this place of incredible stillness and beauty, and the level of healing that happens when we move into these enlightened voices. The entire ego and our entire selves has to reorganize. And then when we integrate all those pieces, we come away so much more clear, so much more aware, so much more empowered, embodied, and the beautiful thing is we're highly productive. When we have all this energy and it's laser focused, we can achieve amazing things in our lives. So I'd love to have you come and play with us in November. The URL, for those of you just listening audio-wise, is tinyurl.com/tapping liberation, which is the name of my work. And that'll take you to the page where you can learn more about the weekend and the price. Notice that after, I think, Monday, the 22nd of October, the price goes up. It's $297 now. It goes up to $347. So any questions that you have about the work that we've done this evening, anything that I've shared with you, the the work around emotional intelligence, about joy and wisdom, Aristotle, the Buddha, anything at all, just please enter your question or raise your hand and I'll call on you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay, well, I just want to thank everybody for being on the webinar with us. It's really been my privilege. I hope you can tell that I love this work, that I dedicated my life to it, and I just think it's absolutely fabulous. And if you have any interest in coming to Texas at all, I'd love to meet you in person and share the work with you. So thank you very much. Unless there's any last-minute questions, I also want to do a special thank you to Nikki for the work that she did and the courage that oh, here's a question here. Okay. Just a nice little shout-out. Thank you from Nancy Robbins. Thank you so much, and blessings to you and all of your work in life. Thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate that too. And the same back at you. I'm hoping that some seeds that were planted this evening might grow and that you might find your way to greater and greater levels of happiness and awareness and joy and enlightenment in your own life, because that really is my passion in this world. And I'm so grateful that Rich Gurman reached out to you and invited you to participate. And you'll have a recording of this so you can go back to it. So thank you, everybody. Good night. And until we have the opportunity to be together again, bye-bye.